Badlands. What are the Badlands? Explain those Badlands. That's a hell of a name.
Welcome, everybody, to this week's episode of Breaking History, episode 94, I believe, going up on the 2-year mark slowly. A lot to go through. Gordon has just wrapped up Badlands Daily, so he's going to be joining us very, very shortly. I think before we do anything, let me just make a quick announcement, because we're coming up right now to the GART Plymouth event, so I'm just going to read the opening announcement. And for anybody who has not gotten their virtual tickets or maybe real tickets to be there in person, there's still a small window of opportunity. So here, let's just have a word from GART. Okay, there we are. That's the ad right there. That's the poster. Here we go. Badlands Media is heading to Plymouth, Massachusetts with the 8th stop on the Great American Restoration Tour, May 1st to 4th. Don't miss out on the conversations and shenanigans. Get your virtual tickets today. With virtual tickets, ensure you are part of the action wherever you may be. You will gain access to exclusive GART chat to interact with other in-person and virtual attendees, get behind-the-scenes photos and videos, get to ask the panel questions so that you can be a part of the live discussion. While many of our show hosts are at the conference, you may notice some changes to our regularly scheduled programming. So get your fix of Badlands Media by purchasing your virtual tickets today. And if you can't watch live, don't fret. Replays of the entire event will be available to all ticket holders. Visit badlandsmedia.tv/events for details on both in-person and virtual tickets. So there we go. Gordon, how you doing?
What's up, man?
You're burning the candle at all edges, man. It's yeah, you just came off the Badlands Daily, and yeah, thank you for giving us more of your brain power. Looking forward to our chat.
Yeah, man, and I'm looking forward to meeting you in person in Plymouth. So when do you fly in?
I think I land at 2:30 in the afternoon or something.
Is that tomorrow?
Yeah.
Sweet. Awesome. Yeah, I land like an hour or so before that. So Ash actually lands at 2:32. So I might wait around for y'all. I got to figure out transportation, but we'll talk more offline about that. But looking forward to meeting you in person. Looking forward to seeing everybody else there in person. It should be a great time.
Yeah, me too. It's gonna be fun, and yeah, my first GART event. So very much looking forward to actually meeting some of the audience members in the flesh, and especially you and the other hosts. Very much looking forward to that.
Based on the feedback that I've gotten at pretty much every GART I've been to since you and I started doing the show together, you're going to have a very large fan club at GART, because at every single GART I've been to, people come up to me and they are like asking me a bunch of questions about you, and are like, is Matt going to be here? Is Matt ever going to come to a GART? So I'm hoping the Matt Ehret fan club shows up to Plymouth.
Yeah, me too. That'd be cool. I got a lot of books. I got like 2 suitcases full of books bringing down. So if people want to pick those up, Revenge of the Mystery Cults trilogy and Clash of the Two Americas and you name it. So yeah, that'll be fun to sign and chat with people. But yeah, we got a lot to go through. I know that you've been keeping up on the Badlands Daily reports. The briefing ops that you've been writing are very good. There's a lot to talk about on the Africa front if we want to go there. I definitely in Canada, there's a certain post-mortem that I think is worth saying a word or two about here, where Mark Carney has just been sort of consolidated as the official handler of this monarchy of the North, this strange, bizarre, technocratic pseudo-democracy, pseudo-nation, I would say. So yeah, I could say a word about that. Pakistan, India. I don't know what you've already gone through on Badlands Daily. So what would you like to start with today?
We should start with Carney, because I feel like you really put that in my mind's eye about the extent to what Carney is. I mean, obviously, whenever a new figure shows up on the global stage, we are always very suspicious of them, especially when they're expressing certain views. But, I would have written off Carney as just another globalist shill. Did not realize how significant of a figure he was. So if you wanted to take a few minutes just to remind everybody who he is, his background, and how significant his rise to power and the timing of it is to this whole situation. I think it provides some great context to Trump's trolling of Canada becoming the 51st state.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I think most Americans, in my experience, don't fully appreciate the structure, the weird, because it's so weird. It's hard to get the mind around. It's so offensive to common sense to think about what is it that controls and has always controlled Canada. Um, so like there's little jokes about, yeah, Canada is America's hat. Uh, all Canadians are they all want to be American, and there's a lot of like conceptions like that I've encountered across all parts of the United States, which betray I just think a certain lack of appreciation that many American presidents died because of organized forces, very, very powerfully top-down organized forces in British Canada, from Lincoln, John F. Kennedy. We've gone through that. Many of the worst takeover. I mean, Canada controls, it's the number one by far owner of U.S. farmland, food resources, and infrastructure. That's Canada. 33% of all of the foreign-owned farmland in the United States is owned by Canada. That's a big deal. Brookfield, that Mark Carney was a major leading figure in up until his appointment as prime minister. Brookfield is one of the largest asset management firms in the world. Right up there with BlackRock. And actually there's a big overlap of the directorship of BlackRock and Brookfield. I'm going to say actually a little something about that, but this is big. It's tied in with the various organized crime networks also in Latin America. Brookfield is something that, a lot of it. When Carney says that we're going to need, what is it, $120 trillion to launch a Green New Deal, a Build Back Better for the world, he's talking about the type of technocratic controls in things like Brookfield that he has managed to wield that reform, that reset of human civilization's behavior and our idea of what is energy. So Brookfield is really behind the green transition internationally. They've also owned, actually, here, I pulled up a couple of slides here. I'm just going to show a couple just to make this more visceral. So yeah, this is just a little picture of Carney, the Bilderberg Group steering committee member, the president of Britain's Chatham House, one of the four presidents of the Cecil Rhodes Milner Roundtable Group that set up the Council on Foreign Relations. He's the current president, one of the four active presidents of the Royal Institute for International Affairs, Chatham House. The thing that Henry Kissinger said he spent more of his time briefing and keeping updated than the U.S. State Department was the British Foreign Office at his May 11th, 1981 speech to Chatham House. So it's that, this is not a little thing. It's a big thing. So this Mark Carney, and there's more to be said, but all that to say, he's, I believe he's a member of he's a Knight of Malta, according to WikiSpooks. WikiSpooks has generally been pretty good on these things, and it claims he's a member of the Order of the Knight of Malta, sort of the right-hand counter gang to the left-hand path of the Jesuits. Always working together at the top in the esoteric inner echelons, but seemingly fighting on the lower exoteric levels. One of his key figures, he just appointed this guy, Mark Wiseman, to become the primary force behind the U.S.-Canada Council to reorganize U.S.-Canada relations. Both of these guys are high up in the World Economic Forum. Mark Carney is a not the chairman, a World Economic Forum. There's a word for it. But anyway, one of the top directors, as is Chrystia Freeland. There's a word for it though, right? It's okay. Doesn't matter. So this guy, Mark Wiseman, if you look at what he is, they say former manager. He's actually an active BlackRock manager as well to this very day. And he's the co-founder of this thing called the Century Initiative as well. He said that we shouldn't be allowing, because the idea behind this is that he wants to make Canada the shining example of a successful society by the year 2100, where they want to have 100 million people in Canada. Does he want to actually encourage families, the return to the atomic family? Not at all. He's basically called for getting rid of vetting of immigrants, so complete unbounded immigration flows That's his approach to doing that. But they're doing it in a way that's going to create like a false sense of affluence and I think arrogance among the Canadian psyche, as has been done in the past. In the 19th century, this was done to keep Canada locked into the British Empire's control grid when many Canadians wanted to join Lincoln's USA after the Civil War. There was a big fight inside of Canada between factions who either wanted to do that, to either become an independent Republic of Canada or join the USA, versus those factions like Sir John A. Macdonald, our sort of the leading founding father of Canada, who said, no, we're going to do everything to keep us locked into the Crown controls, the Privy Council, and we're going to offer a bribe. And it sort of what was done was a perverse version of Lincoln's system that was designed to impose protective tariffs in Canada against the USA, instead of the Lincoln version, which was designed to put protective tariffs around the USA and Canada against Great Britain's dumping. This was different. And not only that, just like the greenback system, there was a similar type of new credit emitted in Canada under John A. Macdonald to invest in building infrastructure, because Canadians were looking at the US saying, like, they're growing, they're industrializing, we're still stagnant under the British control that's keeping us underdeveloped. Why can't we have what the Americans have? And the British finally said, well, okay, we'll give it to you, but as long as you sign on to remaining loyal to our system. And so they gave us a they gave us a transcontinental railway. It's something called the national policy. The population grew, but there was a sick culture that came with that. So there was a good industrialism that did physically uplift people from a lower standard of living. That was good. The British Empire wouldn't have done that on their own, but they said, well, we're going to lose this territory if we don't. And as John A. Macdonald said, I would rather keep Canada a barren wasteland, but I know that if we don't go there, the Yankees will, so we must build rail and other things. So it was very... but they knew that they could sabotage it later on. And I think that's sort of what Carney and Mark Wiseman have been behind so far, with this idea of a century initiative, the high-speed rail networks that they've just announced are going to be built from Quebec City to Toronto. Part of it is also a charm offensive to China to say, hey, look, China, trust us. The big bad Yankees are trying to threaten us and hurt us too, just like you. Let's work together and maybe let Canada influence the Chinese system now. And I think that's part of the dangerous plant or operation that Carney has been assigned to try to do. Also, maybe to loosen the Russia-China bond by saying, hey, look, let's make it easier for foreign enterprises in China to get access to Canadian resources and oil that you desperately need, knowing that if they do that, they could turn off the taps later. That's something that Stephen Harper tried to do. The Chinese realized under Justin Trudeau what the trap was, and they canceled all free trade agreements with Canada in 2017. But I think it's being revamped a little bit now in this new dynamic. This guy, Mark Wiseman, just to get across, he's a Fulbright scholar. Fulbright himself was a Rhodes Scholar, the guy who had innovated globalization. He was a senator in the United States in the 60s and the 70s. And there's a whole Rhodes Scholarship type of program modeled that goes by the Fulbright Scholar name to get brainwashed in England and sent back to the USA. Here's also of interest. He was the president and CEO of the Canadian Pension Plan Investment Board. He began his career at Sullivan and Cromwell, the major regime change operation that goes back to the century of Alan Dulles and family. He headed the Ontario Teachers Pension Plan, senior advisor to Lazare of Lazare Frere, one of the biggest European banks behind the growth of fascism in the 1920s and 30s. That same Lazare banking house is still one of the most active, powerful banks from the top. And he's a current manager at BlackRock. What's that?
Well, I was going to say the pension plan thing is not like a throwaway bullet point. I mean, that's significant. That's a lot of money. And what we've learned over the past several years is that these fund managers take those pension plans and they invest it in stuff that is either nefarious or detrimental to the pensioners, or it's like they're basically doing it for personal gain. They're doing it to advance the interests of the oligarchy rather than the interests of the pensioners.
Yeah, that's how they're able to get things like these windmill farms and solar panel farms to get the investment that they need. Because you're like, who the hell would invest in something so costly? There's very little returns. You put more into it than you get out. You're like, how do these things even get investors? Well, nobody willingly does it unless you're ideologically committed to killing people. So the way that they do it is, they put their assets into controlling positions over pension plans, that are tied to unions, Ontario teachers pension, government pension plans, and then they can control where those things go without most of the people who are members of the plan even knowing where it goes. They just are told, hey, this is where we put your money. You're getting a little return. You haven't lost it.
5% return. It's like, yep, here's your money. You're getting 5% return. It's like, enjoy your money.
Yep, exactly. Yep. So that's a lot of influence. And like I said, he was just appointed this week to the Carney's Council of Advisors on U.S.-Canada relations. So that's important. Another point on that too. He, as I mentioned, he said he dismissed immigration screening as a waste of time. So that's him again at just displaying the Soros agenda in another way. Another guy that I thought was of importance to just bring up here in the real power structure in Canada behind what Carney represents is this fellow by the name of Stephen Bronfman. And for those who may not know, he's the heir of the Bronfman dynasty. Samuel Bronfman was actually a member of the Queen's. He was a Knight of the Order of Bath, a major figure behind the organized crime syndicates of North America and Israel. Stephen Bronfman was himself and is very much implicated in the ADL and the B'nai B'rith apparatus. The Epstein circles, the Maxwell circles revolve in and out of this thing too. Very, very top down. And I would say it's even more this clan that was installed as a controlling hand in organized crime and that soon became very active in the Privy Council. Charles Bronfman was in the 60s, 70s, 80s, was a member of the Queen's Privy Council, along with people like Maurice Strong in Canada. That's one of the controlling hands of real influence in Canada, I would say, is the Privy Council. He has been a longtime advisor, and I would say even manager of Justin Trudeau. He is currently the revenue chair on the board of directors of the Liberal Party itself. Very influential. He controls all of the finances of both the Liberal Party, but I would say more broadly, the Liberal Party has become more and more the government as far as the civil service, the ideologues assigned to control the vast bureaucracy that is Canada. It's not really a party so much as it is the government more and more than people realize. And it's something else. So this guy, Stephen Bronfman, he was caught in the Panama Papers as well. So he's got huge offshore tax havens that even Mark Carney, overseeing Brookfield, had followed Bronfman's lead in utilizing offshore tax havens in British Cayman Islands for so-called the benefit of Brookfield investors. Mark Carney defended it, saying, hey, look, I know it's kind of gray area, illegal, but it made our investors a lot of money. So that's how Mark Carney himself defended his choice to follow the Bronfman model. Another thing about Brookfield is that it's very tied into Qatar. It controls about $1 trillion of assets directly. A lot of companies, a lot of green energy internationally. Most of Brazil's energy has been taken over, and infrastructure has been taken over by Brookfield. Qatar owns about 1/10 of all of Brookfield's assets. So that's a weird relationship that somebody has to scratch on a little bit more. One of the points of interest here is that Bronfman, he's the cousin of Peter and Edward Bronfman. His cousins founded Brookfield Asset Management in 2005. Now, the thing itself didn't really start then. It actually started earlier, and I'm going to say something about that. It was caused by the merger. Actually, I got that here. of Brascan, a Canadian company known as Brascan, which is the Brazilian Canadian energy utility company, and another company called EDPER. EDPER was created in 1959 by Edgar and Peter Bronfman. So this thing ran as an asset management company for between 1959 and 1995 as one of the many but driving forces of international shell companies that owned as umbrellas a lot of other assets. Like I said, I think it's even more powerful than the Mayor Lansky operations in the United States. I think this was actually more influential than that. But it merged. So EDPER merged with Brascan in 1995, took on a different name, and by 2005 took on a new name, which is Brookfield Investment or Brookfield Asset Management. So that's also important because Brascan was set up, actually, it says here in 1912, it was set up in 1899 as a Canadian utility that was designed to create and then control Brazil's infrastructure. And it did up until 1969. Now, Brascan, or what was known then as the Brazilian Traction, Light, and I forget, I can't see that other word there. Brazilian Light and Traction.
Well, it says Brazilian Traction, Light and Power Company, founded 1912.
Okay, Brazilian Light, Traction, and Power Company. So this was behind, and a book was written on this called "Let Us Pray," spelt like predatory prey, which outlined how Brazilian Light and Traction, which is again Canadian owned, was behind the installation of a military fascist dictatorship in 1963 that overthrew the nationalist government of Goulart. This was done as a precedent for what was later done in Argentina with the overthrow of the nationalist leadership of Allende, when Bechtel, another private major firm run by George Shultz, installed Auguste Pinochet as the military junta leader, and that ran Operation Condor, sort of the application of what the lessons, the infrastructure built up in Vietnam that were then applied to all of Latin America, utilizing Green Berets, Jesuits, top and bottom up and top down occultists, unreconstructed Nazis that were still being employed to set up and advise right-wing dictatorships that then privatized everything, opened up to the free markets, allied demands of the World Bank and IMF. That's what Brascan was behind. Finally, they were told, they changed their name to become Brascan in 1969. And in 1978, they were told by the new government in Brazil that you have to nationalize, you have to divest. They were just too incendiary in controlling the Brazilian deep state. So they did. They sold off their investments to a Brazilian utility, a Brazilian-controlled utility, and they were swimming in money. And at that point in 1978, the Bronfmans came in and pretty much bought Brascan. So they had already been buying they already owned Brascan since 1978. And then what I've noticed is that, oh, here, let's actually get that. I'll get that after, actually. Is that they also were influencing and controlling other utilities, all owned, based in Canada, largely influenced by the Bronfman clan, who I think are cardboard cutouts for something even higher. Not I think, I know it's true. But the Mexican Light and Power Company, the Brazilian Barcelona Traction, Light and Power Company, Jamaican Public Services, all owned as Canadian entities.
The Barcelona Power Company?
Yeah, the Barcelona Power Company. That's Spain, right? So it's
yeah. Is there any? I wonder if is there any connection to that and like the power outage there? I don't know, but just
I don't know. I think of that, but it might be. I follow astroclimatology websites though, and I know that there was a massive coronal mass injection that did strike the Earth at around the same time, and I don't think these guys are controlling the sun yet. So it's yeah, but yeah, definitely worth looking at. Yeah, the Spanish language or the Latin, I shouldn't say Latin, but the Spanish language countries and also Portuguese definitely are targeted and have a similar control mechanism. I think Santander also, the major bank, that has a big influence in Brazil, is a danger to the BRICS. I think the viability of the BRICS is threatened by this thing that not enough people properly appreciate. That's a thing. I was gonna say. And what was interesting, even though they had to divest and sell off all of their Brazilian controlled utilities in 1978, by 2005 they began buying it back. So Brookfield, the merger of the Peter Edgar Bronfman company and the Bronfman controlled Brascan, which merged to create Brookfield. This thing began in 2005, immediately buying up Latin American and specifically Brazilian assets, again, that they had formerly owned, right? And at a certain point in 2015, this motley, or this website here that I'm showing is from 2015, when Standard & Poor's, and this is the way this thing works, is that they downgraded. This is how economic warfare works. You know, who controls Standard & Poor's? That creates the ratings over a nation or a company are going to have triple A, triple B, C junk grades, which will heavily influence, you know, those countries or those companies' ability to be viable. It's completely arbitrary. It's weaponized, and they downgraded Standard & Poor's, downgraded Brazil to junk bond status, resulting in a complete buying spree, like a liquidation buyout of their infrastructure that Brookfield bought a lot of. So they reacquired pipelines. This is a $5.2 billion purchase for a network of gas pipelines in Brazil in 2018 or 19. Alternative energy sources, you name it, they bought it. So you got all of this going on. And then the last thing here, because I mentioned, you know, certain mafia connections and Ghislaine Maxwell. Now, Mark Carney happens to also be close friends with Ghislaine Maxwell. That's him in 2013. That's him and his wife, Diane, just chilling in Britain with Ghislaine Maxwell lying down on the grass with them. Yeah. So you got this.
Dude, send me that graphic. Please send me that graphic. That is a compelling connection.
Yeah, for sure. I will. Absolutely. I don't know if he's ever been on the Epstein, the Lolita Express, but I definitely, like, there's some serious connections there. Diane Carney, also a very active, influential person, more than people realize, in the Eurasia Group based in New York. It has a lot of leading liberal technocrats tied to Carney who are running this thing to try to help imperialists understand how to infiltrate and get into the psyche of Eurasian nations. That's part of their mandate.
Yeah, I mean, given his banking background, Carney's, I would be even more interested in his potential connections to Robert Maxwell, her father, more so than her.
I think some stuff has been written about that I noticed, but it's all kind of new to me as well. So I didn't take any serious note yet of, but I'm sure there's a story there big time. Last thing I'll just say here, and then I'll throw it back at you, is Claire. He's the cousin of Claire Webb Bronfman and Sarah Bronfman. And these were two leaders of the Nixium cult of Keith Raniere. And that's Claire Bronfman, the heiress of the Bronfman dynasty in New York. For those who don't know, this is a weird, like, pseudo-Scientology modeled self-help sect that had Raniere as sort of the godhead. They would do things like a 10-day celebration every year for his birthday. You had to call him the Vanguard. Really weird. The members of this sex cult had to also get some weird esoteric sort of
branding,
like cattle brand. Yeah,
his brand.
Yeah.
It's like a grooming. It's like a grooming sex cult, right? I saw somebody in the chat say it was a cult to train whores for the elite, which that may or may not be true, but that seems like, to some extent, given the fact that they were like really famous actresses who were like indoctrinated into it. Very strange and those people were like charged with crimes in the U.S.
Yeah, I know. It's really strange. And they seem to have thrown a part of it under the bus. And there's like a sanitized, limited hangout story of what this is provided to the public. But there's definitely something a lot deeper.
That's what they always do, though, don't they? They always throw out a scapegoat, and they're like, it's all on this person. Right. Yeah. That blonde chick. She's like, nope. She was like she's the extent of it. Just focus on her. This pretty blonde girl. You know, she was part of a sex cult. You know, it's very salacious. Everybody, please look at her. Don't look over here.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Oh, and this is so when you start looking at like Sarah's and Sarah Bronfman's circled there, but she's right next to Claire Bronfman. They brought in like the Dalai Lama, who, by the way, also gave a big hug and honored Keith Rainier, also as sort of this modern spiritual guru, in an event back in, I think it was 2013 or so, might have been a little bit later. So you got these strange spiritual warfare aspects of this operation, on a bunch of levels. And yeah, the fact that these guys are also tied to like Roger Stone also had some weird connections on many levels to the Nixium cult. Who's he may be a good guy. I don't even know if he means well or not, but definitely very influential amongst the MAGA crowds. And I think that they installed a lot of their people who seem to often be very close to Nixium or Scientology into controlling positions within the resistance movements against empire. So that's something to be aware of. But again, Mark Carney is just rotten to the core on every level. And again, Maurice Strong, when you look at like the guy who Mark Carney largely is embodying as the spirit of this Canadian oligarchism, Maurice Strong, who's the father of the Green New Deal in so many ways. He's the co-founder and mentor of Klaus Schwab, the co-founder of the World Economic Forum. This Maurice Strong also, his identity, if you want to understand his psychology type, that I think also is important to understand the Mark Carney psychology type, is to look at Colorado and his Baca Grande, what do you call it? The Baca Grande territory within Colorado that runs and owns the majority of the Ogallala Aquifer in the central of the United States. That's all owned by Maurice Strong. And it became in the 70s and 80s under Maurice Strong's patronage an international cult center of the New Age. And today there's hundreds of New Age cults all in this massive, territory, that are very much tied to Lucis Trust, different types of satanic agencies. Some of them look like and sound nice, lighten life and increase your vibration, all that nice language. But in reality, there's something much more nefarious that's managing these things as far as its esoteric sort of, hidden part. That's the more important part. And I think that people like Carney and Strong understand that, or people like Bronfman understand that. So just throwing that out there, some considerations for people to have in mind when they think of like, what the hell is it behind the psychology of what is shaping Canada as part of a broader great game, right now.
Yeah. And like I encourage people to go back a few months ago, I think maybe a month or two ago, we did the Mark Carney episode in preparation for the election. I think it was after he was after he was sworn in as a temporary or the interim. And yeah, that really opened my eyes to the idea that, because as you said, Americans all joke about Canada being the little brother, but really it seems like we are under the stewardship in a lot of ways of the ruling elite, the British elite, or the British aligned elite in Canada. So it's an important distinction to understand. Trump has kind of hinted at that, saying like, we give Canada $200 billion in surplus trade. Like we're basically just giving them $200 billion a year. We get nothing in return. We spend $200 billion a year, like protecting Canada basically and helping them, and we get nothing in return. So, kind of hinting at the fact that it's a very unilateral relationship. It's not mutually beneficial. So I stumbled on Saturday. I was like watching my kids, and I was listening to just stuff in the background, like YouTube stuff. And it like switched on to this weird like debate format between Kevin O'Leary, if you're familiar with him, like Mr. Wonderful, who's Canadian, and Anthony Scaramucci, which I thought was interesting. It was like 40 minutes. I ended up listening to the whole thing. I have a clip from that that I want to play. And basically the format was people from the audience asked questions. They each got 90 seconds to respond. And one of the questions was, what do you think of Canada becoming the 51st state? So I want to get your reaction to what Kevin O'Leary says, because Kevin O'Leary is, pro MAGA. He's been pro Trump since 2015. He's very much of a pragmatist in terms of like the economy stuff. He's pro tariff. He very much supports like the China tariffs. I don't agree with everything he says, but I thought what he said nuanced answer he gave was interesting. As I was pulling that up this morning, I stumbled onto this other thing that got posted today, a debate between them. It's like 2 minutes long on some CNN or whatever show about Mark Carney. I only kind of like listened to that very quickly. So I want to play that one first. It's only 2 minutes long and see what they say. These guys seem like they claim they've known each other forever, and they're on opposite ends of a lot of these debates. Scaramucci, for those who aren't familiar, and O'Leary made fun of him in the other video, because he now holds the record, some person in the Reagan administration, for the shortest serving person in a presidential administration, 11 days in the Trump 1.0 administration. It's widely speculated that Scaramucci was brought in to sniff out traitors inside the administration. And as a result, like Reince Priebus resigned, John Kelly was elevated to chief of staff. John Kelly then fired Scaramucci. And that people even call it the Scaramucci model, like bringing somebody in, like an outsider in to like sniff out, leakers, basically. It's hard to know exactly what was going on there, but there were a lot of moving parts at the time. So it definitely seemed like he was brought in for a specific reason. He has been anti-Trump at certain points in his life, like vocally, like publicly, 2015, then again in 2019, then again in 2024, criticizing Trump. But he has known him for a long time. So how much of that is authentic, how much of it is not, I don't know. But point is that this is I want you to hear what they say about Carney. I don't know how substantive this will be, but I'm gonna play it at 1.25 speed, and then I really want to play the other one, which is like a 2 or 3 minute clip, because I think I want to hear what you have to say about O'Leary's suggestion.
And Kevin knows that Mark Carney's going to win the election as prime minister in his hometown up there, and Mark Carney's not going to roll over for Donald Trump. I mean, why are you fighting with our best ally? I mean, that's the thing I think is one of the most upsetting parts of all this.
Mooch, at one point, and Ken, I want you to address that point, but there is, you talk about trust. I'd love for you to address this. It's not just the global allies or people around the world. A friend of our show, of course, Andrew Yang, he tweeted this saying, heard from multiple big company CEOs that they are making plans to pull back spending and hiring or lay people off based on uncertainty unless there is an announcement on tariffs by Monday. Kevin, what's your reaction to that? Do you think the trust issues with these CEOs is something to address from this administration, or should they not be this worried?
They shouldn't be worried. At the end of the day, the opportunity is immense. We just talked about Carney in Canada. He is not an elected official. He is a stopgap measure. He has no mandate for the Canadian people. His party wiped out the Canadian economy. It's highly likely he won't win the election, so I don't agree with that. But the opportunity between Canada and the United States to put those two economies together is immense, and that would be zero tariffs both ways, north and south. People don't see that right now because they're gnashing their teeth, and the frenzy is in the middle of an election with the Canadian people, and they're using Trump as fulcrum. Carney's basically saying, look, I know I wiped out the economy, and I know 25% of you are now living in poverty, and I know 41% of the Canadian dollars were wiped out by my policies, but don't worry about that. Let's just stay on the focus of the evil Trump south of the border. I will save you from him. Canadians aren't that stupid. They figured out that their biggest trading partner is the United States, biggest ally for 150 years, and at the end of the day, this will too, just like a marriage. Sometimes there's a tiff, and certainly Anthony knows that, and you kiss and make up.
Well, while we're not on a couch, let's get on one for a second. Anthony, do you believe that?
I never tiff with you, Kevin.
Oh, this is a beautiful moment and a beautiful marriage.
Okay, yeah. So that's, O'Leary buying into the fact that we have free and fair elections, and he obviously had more faith in the Canadian people than others, but because you kind of called it that Carney was gonna win this, unfortunately. And he probably stole it, to be frank, because we certainly don't have free and fair elections here in America. Yeah. So not a terribly substantive video. I actually am more interested in your reaction to what he's about to say here about the 51st state. So let's play this second one, and then you can kind of respond to the whole thing.
Sure.
Should Canada become the 51st state of the Union? And what are the pros and cons for that, please?
Wow.
Want me to go first?
Yeah, I think you should go second. Mooch first.
Me first.
Yeah.
Okay, so no, Canada should not become the 51st state of the Union. The North American continent has done way better than the South American continent. There's a great book about this by a guy named David Landis. It's called The Wealth and Poverty of Nations. Why did the North American continent do so much better than South America, where they have the same resources, the same coastlines, roughly, the same amount of minerals and oil? It has to do with our legal system, and it has to do with the integrity of a democracy. And if the Canadian people want to be independent, and I believe they do, if you look at the polling, they certainly do, we should leave it like that. We should work with them. Kevin brought up something about an economic protectorate, which I certainly agree with. But I think most Canadians want to have their own national identity. And I don't think the United States should go back to 18th century imperialism and force something on the Canadians that they themselves don't want. It's just it's a recipe for disaster.
Mr. Canada?
Well, I think we're at a unique time in history. Canada, unfortunately, has been ruled for the last 9 years by an idiot king. And his policies destroyed the wealth of Canadians, from parity on the dollar to the U.S. down 41%. They can't even go to Disneyland anymore. And the idiot king is still there. There's going to be an election in the next 90 days. I begged Trump to wait. It didn't happen. But the idea was to wait until a mandate was secured by a new leader. It looks like it'll be a guy named Pierre Poilievre, and then he could negotiate with his peer. There is 13% of Canadians are willing to consider giving up their citizenship to become Americans. That's not enough to do that. But 43% want to explore some kind of an economic union. And to me, it can get way past 50%. If you ask Canadians tonight, 11 out of 10 would rather change their Trudeau pesos into American dollars like that, because it's been destroyed by the idiot king. And so the key here is, what can we do together that makes us both better? Instead of fighting about the 49th parallel, let's worry about the Chinese cruising around to the north, where they're digging out minerals up there, and the Russians. And let's spend 2%. Canadians have not done that yet. The new leadership will probably say, look, to solve all this tariff warfare, we'll go to 2% on NATO, and let's get NORAD back up and running to show the Chinese there's no way they can come from the north, or the Russians. Russians, I don't really care about that much. That's a tiny economy, smaller than Italy. But the Chinese, you don't want to mess with those guys. And we got to protect ourselves.
That's time. I have to tell.
All right. So obviously, I'm, Kevin O'Leary, I respect the fact that he's always been very pro-Trump, and he's not afraid to lose friends over that, and he never has been. So I respect him for that. I think he has a little bit of a naive worldview, because he's not read in on a lot of the stuff that we talk about on this show. And obviously he didn't think Carney was going to become the leader. So what is your response to the idea of an economic union between, and just everything he said?
I guess it's really how you think about what that means, because it may or may not be good depending on how you're conceptualizing what is an economic union, what is economics, how does it work. Those ideas will determine whether this could be a good or a bad idea. And I think with Kevin O'Leary, who I followed a bit over the years, and one thing that I found, he's dangerously incompetent, but he's of the type of character who's extremely dangerous, I would say, because he speaks with absolute certainty in his language. Mm-hmm. That's part of his marketing brand, is you speak with absolute certainty as you've taken your position as the brand of a certain type of conservative voice of against wokeism. So, there's obviously going to be an attraction, there's a market for that, but there's no sense, for example, he has spoken about his belief that the European Union is the model that we should follow. And the creation of a euro for North America. Yep. I would say that's a trap, because we've talked about this, but the whole European Union was designed by a bunch of misanthropic technocrats tied to the Bilderberger group over decades and decades, designed to destroy the ability of sovereign nations of Europe to even have a say in their destiny. That's why it was created. So that's a big psychological flaw on the one hand. Number two, I think his overemphasis on Pierre Poilievre's guaranteed victory that he always maintained was beyond incompetent, I find. Anybody looking at what Pierre Poilievre was actually saying as a policy would know that he had nothing. All he had was really stop the carbon tax. That was he put the entire Conservative Party around the single issue of stopping the carbon tax, such that last minute, when Carney just said, by the way, I'm not going to do the carbon tax anymore, there was nothing left. They had nothing to hold on to, and they just collapsed. They had no vision. Both Carney and Poilievre both support the militarization of the Arctic. Justin Trudeau last year, at this very time last year, endorsed and ushered in the Arctic defense policy upgrade that called for installing long-range missiles in the Canadian Arctic in preparation for the oncoming war against especially China. Carney also endorses and maintains that position, also re-emphasizing our enmeshment in NATO and NORAD, and Russia as the other enemy. So Poilievre and Carney, and I think Kevin O'Leary knows that. I don't think he's that. He's
Yeah.
a smart guy.
That's the thing that always like bothers me when these guys who are like self-made billionaires, it's like, but you don't understand that elections are all stolen and fake, and like you don't understand that like who Mark Carney is and why he would be able to muscle his way into office and why it was probably preordained to some extent. And yeah.
Well, also the other and the last thing too on that is Canada's elections involve mostly hand counting, like hand counted
does it?
votes.
Okay.
Yeah, we don't use Dominion or Smartmatic voting machines up here.
Interesting.
Which is ironic because Dominion has a massive hub, an office, in the same building that hosts the Soros Tide Foundation
in Toronto, right?
Yeah. So it's interesting that we ourselves didn't actually apply it.
bizarre.
Yeah, it is. So there are still ways, I would say, of it makes it more difficult to cheat, though it's still not impossible. And one of the things we have Elections Canada, which is part of the civil service. And I would say, like I mentioned earlier, the civil service of Canada has become mostly run as a branch of the Liberal Party over the last 60 years. So you could get your own ideological, devotees into positions of high influence within Elections Canada, within their higher counting offices that can then just make shit up. They could do that. It's possible. But the other thing I would say is people underestimate the brainwashing that Canadians have been subjugated to over the course of 150 years. Yeah. And there was, if you want to get Canadians to be the stupidest version of themselves possible, talk about having a U.S. takeover of Canada. It's bad. People, and again, Americans underestimate the power of this hypnotic induction that's been put there in our school system. That like we are just like was done by woke brainwashing for Black people in America to get them to take on a victim identity that you are the people who are the suppressed people that need to get revenge and reparations, and you should have a chip on your shoulder, and that sort of identity is really conducive to getting to radicalizing young people into becoming, rioters and Black Lives Matter and other things. Same thing. And a lot of the Jews have been told you are the perpetual suppressed people. Holocaust is your identity. That creates a really good climate to radicalize a bunch of fanatical Zionists to do things that they don't see as reprehensible as it is in the Gaza or elsewhere. So it's the same thing for Canadians. We've been really, really conditioned to be victims of American imperial bad guys that always want our water. They want our stuff. And it's like, we kind of subdued that. We had a little bit of like false, we didn't think in those terms for a number of decades, but Trump just pressed the nerve. And I think that was a blunder. I really don't think that was a great idea to activate that cycle, that part of the zeitgeist. So I'm prepared to believe that this was, especially in the East Coast, in Ontario and Quebec and the Maritimes, this was a natural outcome of a very stupid, brainwashed Canadian culture having a reflex to go to the Liberals to keep them safe from big bad Americans.
Yeah, no, that 100% could have been what happened, and I didn't know that in Canada they did the hand counting, counting. So, of course that.
Well, paper ballots. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, but like paper ballots, and that's what they do in France, by the way. So they do that in France as well. That's not another little wrinkle in the caveat, but it is interesting. As I pulled up right here, 40K foot AGL view said Canada has 3x oil reserves of USA. That was another thing that O'Leary pointed out earlier in the debate, was that he said whether or not this is true, I don't know, but he said that Alberta has more oil than the entire continental United States, like plus the Gulf and everything. So if that's true, I mean, that's significant, and that would suggest that and plus all the rare earth that we've heard about that's in Canada, and obviously then you have timber and other resources there, very, very large landmass, rich in resources. So Canada has the potential to be unlocked, I think, and be a very prosperous economy and like a powerhouse of an economy. And there could be really, really good opportunity to partner with Canada economically under the right conditions. But to your point, the brainwashing, I mean, a lot of Canadians, I feel like, feel more akin to being European than they do American, right? Like we're like they like value that to some extent, at least certain segments of it, right? Like consider themselves more European or more akin to European culture than to American culture. Is that true, or is that not true?
No, it's really powerful. This fake pseudo nationalist identity, this synthetic nationalism that's been created. It's very peculiar. In that it's like even the Quebecois culturally might be an interesting hybrid between like French, European, and North America, like U.S. culture. When you go to Montreal, it's fun. It's fun. But if you ask them, they're offended by the idea. Most Quebecois have been brainwashed to be offended by the idea that they have a connection to France. Right. So they have a beef, a chip on their shoulder,
So,
an
so
inferiority
they
complex.
resent the idea that they're French roots. Okay.
Though they clearly are. It used to be New France. That's why they speak French.
And they speak French. Yeah. I mean,
but-
Burning Bright's wife is from there and speaks French. So
yeah, exactly. It's quite funny and weird, but yet there's been an inferiority complex that's been worked on to shape an anti-Frenchism as well as an anti-Americanism. So even in the separatist movements of Quebec, they're as equally petrified of joining the USA as the British ass-kissing sort of Anglophile Ontarian English speakers or Manitoban or maritime English speakers, many of whom have been given a very romantic version. They have more affinity to England than they do to anywhere else.
Yeah.
So, and they're all afraid of the US,
Yeah,
except
yeah.
for Alberta.
So they consider
Alberta's
themselves
the exception.
So they consider themselves more akin to Britain, like British, than to America. It's like
The
they would
English
feel-
ones do. The French
English ones
ones,
do.
it's very peculiarly a kind of like blank slate that was created in 1960. Like that's when all of the Quebecois history
Gotcha.
was told, started in 1960 with what's called the Quiet Revolution. And that was basically just a technocratic de-Christianization of Quebec, because formerly Quebec was very Catholic.
Mhm.
And that ran the political and business class for centuries. And after this revolution, there was a conscious, and Pierre Elliott Trudeau played a big role in this maneuver with a bunch of Rhodes Scholars in the 50s to create kind of like a George Saakashvili, kind of like a color revolution of young technocrats who would overthrow the former regime and install a new technocratic regime based upon French. Like that there's going to be a new elite, they'll have French names, but nothing was really going to change except they won't be Christian. Like you're going to get rid of any type of idea that Christianity is part of our heritage. That ties us too much to France and Colbertism, and you're going to have like a new type of freedom. And so that came in. That was sort of the counterculture revolution of the 1960s that so many young Canadians went through and Americans went through in their own ways. And again, if you ask most baby boomer French Canadians today, what do they think of like before the summer of love, before the sex, drugs, rock and roll, libertinism that exploded? There was no history. It was all just patriarchal, abusive Catholic priests hurting everybody. There was no past beyond that point. So yeah, it's a psychologically and their whole identity isn't primarily today. The whole like separatist movement has become mostly grounded in simply language. My language, ma langue. J'ai le droit de protéger ma langue français. Like I have the right to protect my French language, and that's all it is. But what are you saying with your language? The idea, content, the culture, it's all been as destroyed as it has anywhere else. There's no idea of a vision for the future beyond going green, having a Green New Deal, but doing it with an independent Quebec instead of one with North America. So that's a big problem, and that's why I think it's important for people to revisit like what were the authentic Quebec nationalists who had an idea of man made in the living image of God, cooperating with the United States, with France, with de Gaulle, who came to Quebec in the 60s and said, vive le Québec, live free Quebec, but he did it with the idea of his friend Premier Daniel Johnson, who was working together with Bobby Kennedy in 1968 to build a real movement, an anti-imperial movement in North America and in Europe against this Bilderberg, monstrosity that was growing at the time. And so that's what we have to sort of, I think, use it if we're Canadians. That's what we have to sort of speak to and revive as a latent memory.
Yep.
Because otherwise, there's not much there.
Well, I'm not so certain that what Trump did was blunder or not calculated, because I actually see a lot of parallels between what he's doing with Canada and what he's doing with Gaza. On Monday night, I had Lieutenant Colonel Oakland McCulloch on the Book of Trump and to talk about maneuver warfare. And so this is a retired Army colonel who used to teach maneuver warfare to tankers, to guys driving tanks, combined arms tactics, that sort of thing. And so we talked about it in the context of kinetic warfare and the tactics of it. But then we also kind of applied those tactics to psychological narrative warfare. And the two ciphers that we came up with, or that he explained to me, that I have internalized now and I'm going to continue to use moving forward, is he said, people misuse this word maneuver warfare when they are talking about it, because they just think of like blitzkrieg. They just think of what's called a feint, which is like you go and you attack somebody and then you retreat to draw them into your territory, and then you surround them and flank them, right? So you're drawing them into an ambush. That's a feint. He's like, but the other one is called a demonstration, which is you send a detachment somewhere else on the battlefield. You get the detachment to attack the enemy camp. The enemy then directs all of his attention to that area, this is what the Russians did to the Ukrainians when they went and attacked Kiev. They had no interest in taking Kiev. That was never the target. The target was to draw the Ukrainians away from the Eastern Front. So then it was easier to push forward in the Eastern Front. So that's a demonstration. And he says more often you actually use the demonstration than you do the feint. So like in the narrative context, we determined that the tariff thing was a feint, like Trump's tariff plan, because not that he doesn't intend to move forward with it, but he came out full throated, like we're doing these massive tariffs, right? Full bore, like just everyone was dumbstruck. I can't believe he actually did it. We never thought he'd actually do it. And then he came out and the markets crashed. And then he came out like a week later and was like, yeah, we're going to do like a 90-day pause on it. Right. And now what's happening? Like everyone's lining up to like negotiate a deal with him. Like they're eager to negotiate, which is what he wanted the whole time. Same thing with Gaza. He came out full throated February 5th and said, we're going to take control of Gaza and we're going to turn it into a Riviera. And everyone was like, hair on fire. Like, are you kidding me? And Netanyahu sitting there smiling like, hell yeah. And now Trump is openly saying, Netanyahu, like there's a video of him saying, you need to stop the suffering in Gaza. This is getting out of hand. Like you need to stop this immediately. And pulled all the way back from from Gaza. But, whether that's a feint or a demonstration, he was bringing attention to Gaza. He was bringing attention to, and as I said last week, I kind of think the Netanyahu, like keeping Netanyahu propped up in office is similar. It's like he's keeping all eyes are now on Israel. All eyes are now on Iran. Everyone's fully expecting a war between Iran and Israel. And when it happens, or when Netanyahu and the neocons try to make it happen, everyone's going to be ready for it. And they're going to be ready to say, absolutely not. We're not going to follow you. Go into that battlefield by yourself. You can go die. The Canada thing kind of feels a little similar, because he was bringing all this attention to Canada, joking about it being the 51st state, which everyone was, the Jack Posobics of the world were like, oh, hell yeah. Like we're going to get a 51st state. And I'm sitting there like, for all the reasons that you just said with the brainwashing, why would we want this massive electorate? 40 million people? We want to add 40 million people to the United States, increase our population by 12%, and bring in people who are ideologically all the way to the left. Like, I don't think we need that. I don't think we need that people who want socialism, people who want welfare state. Like, I don't think so. There's no way Trump actually means this. Now all of a sudden, eyes are in Canada. Trudeau resigns. Carney gets sworn in. I remember the day Carney got sworn in because it was viral. You and I had already talked about Carney. We already talked about the British Commonwealth. You already educated me on the fact that Canada is a British province and like a British colony, basically. Everyone on X was like, why the hell is Mark Carney like on bended knee swearing fealty to the British crown? And it's like, everyone was like, holy shit, Canada is like part of the British Empire still? Yeah. And so Chris Paul from Badlands, who you'll love Chris. You and Chris will get along very, very well. Because I feel like y'all have even though your backgrounds are very different, you both, like, Chris is a former like liberal, former like Democrat voter, and has like come kind of full circle. So I feel like you probably have similar worldviews, but he comes from like the Hollywood LA scene where he ran like a very popular nightclub, and then COVID ended his career, and he realized that they're all communists, and how he always hated communism, but he just realized how pervasive it all was, and everything. And it happened under the Trump administration. So anyway, Chris had this theory that, what's the guy's name who ran against Carney?
Pierre Poilievre.
Yeah. So he had a theory that that guy was the Ron DeSantis of Canada. And Chris was very early on the Ron DeSantis hate train because he called it before the midterms. Chris was like, I think what's going to happen is you're going to see, like, if we do lose if the midterms are not the overwhelming red wave that they say it's going to be, and it wasn't, I think you're going to see like Ron DeSantis come out and try to like overtake Trump as the leader in the clubhouse to be the next president. And like, you know, Trump's MAGA has failed, and we need a new leader for MAGA. And that's Ron DeSantis. Called that months before it happened. And then the moment it happened, was just always a few steps ahead of everybody else, and being like, Ron DeSantis is 100% trying to subvert Trump and overtake MAGA, and was very early in like making memes and making fun of Ron, which spread very like wildfire. And then of course nobody takes Ron DeSantis seriously now. He's a clown. But the point is that what Chris Paul's point was, the whole point of Ron DeSantis was to take the nomination away from Trump so that the Democrat nominee could win the election, because Ron DeSantis is not that impressive of a candidate. On paper, people thought he was impressive because he, as Florida governor, he was like one of the best governors, but not really actually that great when you dig into what he did. But that's the point. He was propped up as like a straw man to be easily defeated by whoever, like fill in the blank, Gavin Newsom, whoever. So that's what he called that. He's like, this guy Pouvier is 100% being propped up for Carney just to destroy, which is what happened. So yeah, clearly. And I mean, it was weird because if you look to the stats, the polls in December of 2024, the Conservatives had like such a huge lead. It was like 46% of the support of Canadians was going to go to Conservatives if votes were going to happen at that moment. And the Liberals had fallen down to like 23%. So it's like, guarantee all you had to do is not be a disaster. And they couldn't handle it. Like, just don't try to screw up. And it's almost like Pierre Poilievre was told, your job is to just self-destruct. Don't really campaign in a serious way. Don't provide a vision. Don't really go to any podcasts. You know, if you're asked to go on Alex Jones or Tucker Carlson, don't even bother. Just sit back and, you know, wait to act like you're going to be elected no matter what. Don't try very hard. And yeah, great. You just totally imploded. And Interesting little caveat too is that I learned from like when Chris and I together started digging on the morning after Trump made all those initial appointments. Like remember the day he made like 12 appointments. A lot of them were all the Zionists, like neocons, and people were freaking out about it. Chris and I just happened to be on Badlands Daily. We spent the entire episode just like digging into each person and like understanding who they were. Susie Wiles, did not know this about Susie Wiles, but she was part of the Trump 1.0 administration. Trump actually sent her into Florida in 2018 to work on the Ron DeSantis campaign and make sure he got elected. He got elected governor. So when Trump says DeSantis only got elected governor because of me, which is true, like DeSantis was literally making ads of his baby wearing like a MAGA onesie, and he's like, I'm the most MAGA person ever. That was Susie Wiles, his chief of staff, like running his campaign manager or whatever, running his campaign. Then after he gets into office, him and Susie Wiles have like a falling out, and he actually got her thrown off the Trump 2020 campaign. Like he had it out for blood. And then Susie Wiles came back, and during the 2022, this is all like being like reported. I found all this information. She then comes back to Trump in 2022 and starts feeding him information about DeSantis and like knows everything about him. And like, because he had basically sent this person into DeSantis' camp, made DeSantis into what he was, the governor of Florida. He before that, he was a congressman. So nobody knew who he was at that point. And then she came back to Trump's camp and just fed him all the details of who Ron DeSantis was that Trump then weaponized against DeSantis and like Ron DeSantimonious and just calling him like a, booger eating Ron, like all that kind of stuff. And just destroyed him. I mean, he's like, nobody took him seriously after that. And so there is a lot of calculation there, I feel like. And a lot of people are paying attention to Canada now in ways that they weren't because of the ridiculous, we're going to make it the 51st state, which I think that's really more about a decoupling, like cutting out Britain and getting the British crown out of our northern hemisphere, like our northern neighbor, than it is about like actually bringing them into the union. Maybe there's some sort of like what Mr. Wonderful was talking about. Maybe there's an opportunity for some sort of economic union where they use US dollars, whatever the US dollar currency looks like at that point. But it seems to me that we don't want it to become the 51st state. I don't know if that would be great for Canada either. I mean, you would lose a lot of your sovereignty and your national identity. But it seems like getting away from the city of London is definitely in your best interest. And Carney being elevated to his position, it's almost like Trump like summoned this guy by being so like, because he was talking about Canada becoming the 51st state last year, like during the campaign. He was like, we're going to make Canada the 51st state. And people were like, what is this guy being for real? And then all of a sudden Carney's like, hell no, we're not going to do that. And he's running as the anti-Trump guy. So it does kind of feel like this is like a Don King, like promoting the Mike Tyson fight between Trump and Carney.
Well, I guess what was weird is that Poilievre also took on the position of the anti-Trump guy too. So both of them together were they had a very almost identical policy overall. The conservatives and the liberals in this case, trying to speak to this and cater to this pseudo-nationalism thing that the British created over decades. But I guess for me, like I've spent a lot of time, I guess, looking at and mapping out the whole North American Union idea that went back to 2005 originally, that key people around Mark Carney, like his own wife, who's a leading figure in the Canada 2020 think tank, which installed Justin Trudeau. It still is huge. It brings in, works with the behaviorists that took over the USA under Obama. A lot of them have been brought into Canada. I would say it's even a coordinating body behind the behaviorist takeover in 2008 by Obama. But the Privy councillors who created the Canada 2020 think tank, two of them are leading architects of the North American Union, which was originally going to be the thing sprung onto North America as the solution to the great, the big collapse of 2008, modeled on the euro. The idea was to have a North American eurozone with an Amaro. They even coined a bunch of model currencies around what that would be. Digital currencies would be what they would be geared towards, and they're still there. Like these. So my fear right now is that, and this is just a fear, right? Like maybe there's the good guys have figured this out, but my fear is that there's a bait and switch to entrap the U.S. into something which will enmesh it more into the sort of Milner Rhodes Privy Council structures that Mark Carney represents and the Privy Council creatures represent, more than making Canada liberated to become free of the British Empire. That's my fear as a trap that's in motion right now, that I hope Trump doesn't fall into. But I'm just pointing that out there because that's my other theory. That's my concern.
So you're saying that they're gonna actually move closer. Like the plan is to move them closer to London, right?
Yeah, okay. From what I could see in my Untold History of Canada, the Clash of the Two America book series, all 4 volumes, my governing theme that I noticed was that the undoing of America and the undoing of 1776's successes was contingent upon a plan that was first put forth by Aaron Burr in 1799 when he took over the Manhattan Company, or this water project, and turned it into the Manhattan Company that became the Bank of Manhattan. And Aaron Burr tried 4 times, including the Hartford Convention in 1814, that he also played a leading role in, to break up the Union by getting the northern states that didn't have slavery to undo the Constitution and join British Canada. So to make the northern states British Canadian, not to make the British Canadian states more American.
Yeah.
And he tried that in 1799. He tried it in 1800 when he was defeated, but he was defeated when Jefferson got in. He tried it again when he had to become governor of New York, but he was defeated in 1804. So he couldn't do it then. But that was and then he tried it again in 1807. And that's when you had a whistleblower who was an insider who basically said, a senator who basically said, yeah, by the way, there's this conspiracy by Aaron Burr to create a Western dictatorship and declare war against Spain. And then kill Jefferson and install Aaron Burr as the dictator of the United States by joining British Canada and creating a new confederation with the British. And this whistleblower sparked a trial. You know, they had hearings. Evidence only came out later on that proved that were smoking guns, that proved that was true. But Aaron Burr still had enough. People were wise enough that he had to leave the USA, where he, went
so
to
So that's why he went and lived in exile.
Yeah. And it was his.
I knew it was because he was accused of treason, but I didn't understand the extent of it. But yeah, so that's what he was trying to do. He was trying to get the Northeast to join British Canada. That's interesting because, I mean, well, how much did that relate to the Hartford Convention of 1814 when like the Federalists got together and were like, dude, we're never going to win another election again. This sucks. Like we should all just rebel and these states should leave the Union and like break up the Union.
And join up with the idea then as well was to do the Aaron Burr plan yet again and simply join up, have a special relationship with British territories in the north, with Crown territories, and that way they were like, okay, the slave states can be their own thing. We'll wash our hands of it. They'll have their own country, which would have also involved a special relationship with Great Britain, who was buying 80% of the slave cotton.
Yeah, right.
Okay. So yeah, they always had that same thing, and they keep pushing on that angle. So I just fear that they're kind of reviving that program that's been sort of on the back burner for a few generations in a new way.
That's interesting because I mean, you look at how the culture has developed in different parts of America over the past however many years. And the Northeast is considered like the elitist colony of America, right? Like that's where all the elites live. That's where all the money is, especially places like Connecticut, like the suburb of Manhattan. And like a lot of those people, I know people who live up there, and a lot of them view like the rest of America as kind of like the dirty cousins that the British viewed the colonists. It's like, they're our cousins and we trade with them, but they're kind of like the dirty hillbillies who live out in the woods and are primitive, and they're not nearly as sophisticated as, we are. And interestingly enough, it was Aaron Burr's cousin who developed the first superstructure bridge that was built at Trenton in 1804. That kind of like proved all these engineers around the world who thought about this but could never do it. And this was the structure that holds the bridge up being above the bridge, like the bridge being the part that you actually walk and drive across versus below the bridge. And they needed to do that in Trenton because in the springtime, they would get this thrush when all of the ice caps in the Appalachians would melt, and they would get these huge like floods that would come through and destroy the bridges and wash them out, and they have to rebuild them. So they developed a bridge where the structure was totally above the bridge and the water could go underneath it and not wash out the bridge. First suspension bridge, or first like superstructure bridge, was actually Trenton, and it was Aaron Burr's cousin who designed it, interestingly enough. But like up until that point, all the engineers in Britain and France were like, the American engineers, those guys are like a bunch of hillbillies who like jerry rig stuff together. Like they have no idea. Like they're not sophisticated like we are. And then they built the first superstructure bridge. But I digress.
Yeah, no, absolutely. No, I think that's part of the insecurity. The empire has been that just America represents, I guess, ironically, the best of what Britain once represented, as far as looking back to England's role in being a leading figure or a leading player in this Renaissance dynamic that Shakespeare represented, that earlier Erasmus and Thomas More represented, with this heightened idea of a culture where that would be run by sovereign individuals who could be capable of participating in and in the unfolding of creation by tapping into their full creative powers, and were against Britain becoming an empire. And so that better British heritage is what the, John Winthrop Jr. and Cotton Mather and all of these leaders who organized Ben Franklin, they were all like trying to represent, just like the best of Renaissance England heritage and sever it from this parasitical cancer that is the imperial dark, black magician faction that ran the Hellfire Clubs, which was sort of the central cult that organized the entire British Empire from 1710 to 1776. Really, it was the Hellfire Club. Every cabinet member and member of parliament, Walpole, and all these guys were all like Hellfire Club members. They had branches in the colonies, Hellfire branches that managed witch covens that people like Cotton Mather and Cotton Mather. And Ezra Mather in Connecticut were fighting against these witch covens that were like doing really. It's not like Maria Abramovich is a new thing out of a vacuum. She's part of a heritage that was active in Europe, in Russia, in the United States, and tied to this like satanic, underground, which is very evil, very sick. And the founding fathers understood this much better than a lot of people do today. And they did a great job fighting against it and creating a situation where America could really, be the best part of itself, even though there were still problems. And they never resolved getting rid of their stay behinds, their these pro-loyalist stay behinds that acted like they were patriots, but were never so, that took over the Federalist Party, that even took over that created the slave power in the South, that did all of these things in Virginia that are at the heart of the Skull and Bones and all of these like intermarrying families of the American aristocracy today. It was never resolved. And people just need to appreciate the understanding that great American patriots had who were really battling this thing successfully. They're, it's very admirable.
Yeah. Well, that's all very interesting. Why don't we do an ad read and then come back and do and we can either return to this subject or we can shift to some of the other stuff that you had mentioned before we went live.
Right. Let me do I guess I'll do two ad reads. Okay. Should I do two right now? I'll do two.
Yes, go ahead and knock them both out.
Right. Okay. So the first one we had here is Goldco. So let me just read that. Shoot. Okay, Goldco. Damn it. Are you ready for the golden age? With headlines buzzing about Fort Knox, it's time to shine the light on gold. We've seen questions like, is there really gold in Fort Knox, and is the government secretly moving it? But the real question is are we going back to the gold standard? In a world where economic stability is uncertain, gold remains a timeless asset. Fort Knox, the fortress of America's gold reserves, is under scrutiny, and this might be the moment gold proves its worth once again. Don't miss out on helping to secure your future. Gold isn't just an investment. It can safeguard against inflation, currency devaluation, and economic turmoil. Whether it's for your retirement, as a family heirloom, or just to have that peace of mind, this is the perfect time to buy gold. Only time will tell if we are going back to the gold standard. Help secure your wealth now. Visit badlandsgold.com to learn how you can add gold to your portfolio. That's badlandsgold.com. All right. Oops. Okay. All right. And then the second ad for today is I think it's Safe Streets. Is it Safe Streets? Safe Streets. Here it is. Okay. Here we go. Okay, Safe Streets. Now is the perfect time to secure your home and your loved ones. Get a free ADT Smart Home Security System valued at $1,200 from ADT authorized provider Safe Streets. Plus, get a Google Nest doorbell camera at no cost and a $200 Visa gift card from Safe Streets, the most trusted name in home security with more than 106,000 4.9-star Trustpilot reviews. Visit getsafestreets.com/Badlands or call 925-529-6541. That's 925-529-6541 to speak to a representative today. $99 customer installation charge and purchase of new monitoring service required for their termination fee apply. Okay. So yeah, I don't know. What would you like to tackle for the last little bit of our show today?
Man, there are a number of things directions we can go in. The Bandar Abbas thing. I mean, everything happening between Tehran and Mumbai, and I don't know if I'd say Mumbai, I'd maybe say New Delhi. Everything happening in that region of the world, and so let's just pull a map up so we can give people some context. That stuff seems significant right now. It's not really getting attention, of course. I mean, there are plenty of headlines about it, but I don't know if it's registering with people what's happening there and how it could be significant. And frankly, I can't specifically say how significant it really is. Well, that remains to be seen. But what I'm referring to, of course, is this region of the world. And so just to give everyone some context, we are looking at...
You're talking about the explosion at Bandar Abbas?
Yes, the explosion at Bandar Abbas. So let's pull up that that story. We can talk about that. There's also some Pakistan stuff I want to talk about. And this is all connected to CIA, terrorism, funding, all of this stuff that we have talked about on the show for the past 2 years. So here's the article. Tehran in trouble. Deadly port explosion leaves Iran in a bind. Analysis. Well, that's the analysis part of the headline. While Tehran could use the disaster to gain international sympathy, it also means that the Islamic Republic must investigate its own failings, which could reveal weaknesses. This is from the Jerusalem Post. So there's definitely some bias here. The explosion at the Shahid Rajeh port has become a major challenge for Iran. The death toll continued to rise into Monday, reaching at least 65. Iranian officials say this is a challenge for Tehran. It can't ignore the explosion, and it's embarrassing for the regime. On the other hand, it can use this to get sympathy. Iran is trying to short support from Russia and China as it navigates a potential deal with the U.S. over its nuclear program. Iran needs to show it is stable and can secure sites such as ports. If it can't secure them, how can it secure its nuclear program? Now, this is from a few days ago, 2 days ago. The newest reports out today is that the death toll has climbed to 70. But let's give some context for what this all is. So we'll come over here. You're the one actually who educated me on the international north-south transport corridor, which is this orange line right here. And basically it's changing the previous route, which took 40 to 60 days and went through the Red Sea, the Suez Canal, Mediterranean, Gibraltar, up through Scandinavia into St. Petersburg. And instead, it now goes from Mumbai to Bandar Abbas, which is where this explosion took place in Iran, and then gets on rail and pipeline to go up through the Caspian Sea to Moscow to St. Petersburg. And there's a number of reasons why people don't want to see this happen, but this is one of them. And when I say people, the Western hegemony, the status quo, this is a big reason right here, is because if Moscow becomes the major node in this transportation corridor, look at how that impacts Europe. I mean, Moscow becomes the choke point for Europe, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
And so they're, for obvious reasons, the Europeans don't want to see that happen, nor do the establishment figures in DC.
Yeah.
So City of London, etc. Here's where it gets interesting. So let's pull up this story. We just went over this on
and that zone there in the Caspian is one of the greatest untapped sources of energy, natural gas and oil anywhere in the world. It's like it's going to be such a hub for any economic decisions for the future. So whoever controls that region is going to really have a huge say in what happens for the world. Yeah.
And so this story from 3 days ago: Russia to fund construction of new nuclear plant in Iran. In addition to that, they're going to supply Iran with 55 billion cubic meters per year of natural gas. And just to give you some context, that is, I think right now they're supplying Europe with 44 billion, if I remember, if my numbers are right. Let me see if I have that in here. They're going to be supplying now. Right now, they're starting off, I think, with like 2 billion. It's like they're starting really slow, but the goal is to get up to the point where they're sending more they're exchanging more natural gas with Iran than they are with Europe. which is pretty significant when you think about the energy demands and how Europe is now completely beholden to Moscow. What also makes it significant is the first. Now, in this article, it says Russia helped Iran build its first nuclear reactor at Bushehr, but I'm pretty sure it was America that first built it, and the Soviets helped them maintain it. I'm almost certain that it was America that built it with the Shah up at and finished it in 1975. That was what I recall reading, like doing this research over the past year, but I could be wrong.
Well, you had the French and the Germans in 79 and 80, or no, 78, 79, who were also behind the reactors that were like mostly built, like 80% built. And then it was just all shut down, put on a moratorium.
Yeah. And so now they're saying that they're also going to, the Russians are going to help them complete phase 2 and phase 3 of the Bushehr power plant. So, which I assume was probably the original plan before the revolution happened in 79. But so you have that happening. You have like Russia coming out and saying, we're going to build another nuclear reactor for Iran, which is obviously going to make certain people, the Zionist coalition, the diaspora, very angry. And then finally, you have this story, which is where did it go? Sorry, I had this pulled up on Badlands Daily, but it was a confession that maybe Israel was behind this. Let's see. Sorry, stand by for that. It is.
You don't mean to imply that Israel had anything to do with that explosion at Bandar Abbas, do you?
Well, I'm not the one implying it. I think actually Israel might be implying it, and this is like the hubris that we're seeing on display here. It is. Where is it? Here it is. Iranian port blast. This is from yesterday. Iranian updated today. Iranian port blast could be planned attack, not an accident. IDF general says. General Amir Avivi hinted at Israeli involvement in a recent chemical strike on Iranian rocket fuel. In an interview with the media line, Brigadier General retired Amir Avivi, so this guy's retired, so he's not active duty, hinted at Israeli involvement in a recent chemical strike on an Iranian rocket fuel, observing that this attack on fuel was for ballistic rockets, so it makes sense that this is a planned attack and not an accident. Looking ahead to renewed U.S.-Iran negotiations, Avivi warned against trusting Tehran's intentions. He noted that Iranian state media are laughing at the U.S. They think they're having the upper hand, and pressed President Trump to choose whether he's going to be a Churchill or a Chamberlain, insisting that gotta love that comparison. Insisting that if Iran does not fully dismantle its nuclear sites, there's one option: an attack on the nuclear sites. On U.S.-Israeli coordination, Avivi said the two governments talk frequently, but that Washington houses voices seeking to retreat from global leadership. He urged a massive airstrike, just as the U.S. is doing now on the Houthis, just as Israel did before in Iran, but a much bigger attack, arguing such a decisive blow would stop the war and not open a new war by crippling Iran's ability to respond. That's an insane thing to say. And I mean, he's obviously lying, because a guy in that position is going to understand that. Russia just came out last week and like finalized its deal, like its security pact with Iran, kind of just reminding everyone, hey, reminder, we just signed a few months ago a security agreement with Iran. If y'all attack them, like, we're going to help defend them. So you're going to be in a war with Russia if you attack Iran. And oh, by the way, like, China's over there, they're getting whatever 60% of their oil from Iran. So they're going to want a piece of that too. So if you want a war with Iran, Russia and China, go ahead and follow through on that. And that's where I think the real nefariousness is like the level of deception that people like Avivi and the bums on Fox News and the bums in the Republican Party are all lying to everybody, is that they're like we can attack Iran and walk away unscathed, scot-free. That is absolute bullshit.
Yeah, it's so dangerous. And I mean, the Iranians have been really good sports as well, and there's been 3 meetings between the Iranian foreign minister and a broader delegation with Witkoff and the American delegation in Oman, then in Rome, then in Oman again. They're going to do a 4th one pretty soon. There's a lot of points of to be optimistic about. The American side has even said that I think this is the first time they formally said this in many years, that they want Iran to have civilian nuclear power. Iran's being a really great sport. They've signed all of the nuclear treaties on non-proliferation that have been put forth through the UN. They've got a fatwa on developing a nuclear warhead, on developing nuclear weapons, and like you said, they've just finalized. I mean, Russia, it seems, was possibly holding it up for a little bit, but they just accelerated getting this thing passed, committing to a 25-year amazing deal with a really bright future of economic cooperation, peace building measures with China as well. It has a very similar 20-year, $400 billion trade deal on energy security, you name it. It's full spectrum with Iran. So that's all happening. There's no reason why Iran would want to risk that beautiful future by doing what they're being claimed that they want to do by these IDF figures and Zionists. There's no, and then you have the Netanyahu circles coming out, promoting war exercises, gaming out, attacking Iran's nuclear sites in the middle of all of this positivity, while they have, as if they don't have enough to worry about already on every other front. They want to pick another fight here. It makes no sense. So yeah, it's and like you said, the Chabahar port and the Bandar Abbas ports, these are the southern flank of the international north-south transportation corridor that also India is key. I mean, so these are ports, the Chabahar having been built by India, which is going to have a spaceport as well to help Iran have a robust space program that the Russians are helping out with as well in Chabahar. That's underway. So, I mean, this, I guess, sets the stage as well for the other point of chaos that's being set up right now by foreign agents in India, because in India, right next to China, so we have the Zionist kooks who are potentially inflaming one zone. We got also something, we got Zelensky throwing out threats towards attacking Russia on Victory Day during a parade where you'll have world leaders from all over in Moscow celebrating the defeat of fascism. And now Zelensky's coming out saying, we have to be prepared to launch an attack if Russia doesn't want to agree to a sustained ceasefire and only wants to give us a 3-day ceasefire. We're going to just go and attack where world leaders are. And then on the other hand, then you have Pakistan and India, which it seems like hotheads are somehow prevailing, especially on the India front, which is very disappointing. I don't know if you have any thoughts on that, because that seems to play into this Iranian situation as well.
Yeah, it's interesting. The situation in Pakistan and India is unique because you have 2 nuclear powers fighting one another, and that's what makes it unique against all the other ones, against Iran, Israel. Even though technically Israel has stolen nuclear technology, and Iran conceivably has nuclear technology, but I don't think any of that's going to go anywhere. This is much more of a wild card for the reasons you said. There's like a lot of historic emotions there, and historic conflict with Jammu and Kashmir. And yeah, the potential for this to spin out into something a lot more than it really is. Modi has been, from what I've read, Modi has been pretty clear that he wants to hunt down every person involved in this. And I would hope that means the people who planned and funded it. And I have to wonder, that money has to trail back to London and DC. There's just no way in my mind that it doesn't. And to that point, here 4 days ago, you have the Pakistani defense minister. He says jihad was created by the West. Khawaja Asif spoke to RT about the history of Islamabad's support for. I'm sorry. There we go. Khawaja Hasif spoke to RT about the history of Islamabad's support for terrorist groups on behalf of the U.S. and Europe. Pakistani Defense Minister Khawaja Asif has claimed that his country was the victim of terrorism in the region, stemming from the policies of Western governments, particularly the U.S., tracing back decades. Speaking to RT on Saturday, Asif called a mistake the decisions by the country's past rulers to join the Soviet-Afghanistan war in the late 1980s and become a platform for training and indoctrinating jihadists on behalf of the West. The minister noted his country was a springboard for the Soviet-Afghan war. The introduction of jihad, which was invented by the West, changed the country's ethos and led to its current issues. The whole ethos of the society was changed to support the jihad, Asif said. According to him, during the war in Afghanistan, Islamabad supplied all sorts of help to the U.S. Later, post 9/11 attacks, Pakistan again joined the coalition. From our soil, all the supplies used to go to us and all the facilities, he said. The minister added, however, both these wars, in my humble opinion, were not our wars. And then Asif insisted that the Pakistan bears the consequences of previous policies. We suffered a lot, and the United States abandoned us around 89 or 90. They went away, and we were left high and dry. I actually want to play this video real quick because I think what he says is interesting.
Yeah, do it.
We're now joined from Islamabad by Pakistan's Defense Minister Khawaja Mohammad Asif. Many thanks for joining us on the program. It's very good to see you today.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Speaking to UK media earlier, you've claimed that Pakistan did, quote, dirty work for the United States and the West, including the UK, for decades and is now suffering the consequences. Could you please elaborate on that statement and provide any examples of such an arrangement, if possible?
Well, I was referring to our cooperation when the Soviet Union entered Afghanistan way back in the 80s. We had no problem with what was happening in Afghanistan. But we joined an alliance way back in the 80s, and we suffered a lot. And the United States abandoned us around 89 or 90 and went away, and we were left high and dry to face the consequences of siding with the coalition against the Soviet Union in Afghanistan. And then came the 9/11. 9/11 again, we joined the coalition, and we provided all possible help from our soil. All the supplies used to go through us, and all of the facilities which were, asked from us. We provided those facilities. Both these wars, in my humble opinion, were not our wars. These were wars between superpowers, or these were wars which concerned terrorism in Afghanistan and, export of terrorism from Afghanistan. Pakistan, in both cases, when the things were wrapped up in the 80s, and then 4 or 5 years back when NATO forces exited from Afghanistan, Pakistan was again left to face the consequences of these two interventions alone. The terrorism has become a daily routine in Pakistan. And this terrorism is coming from Afghan soil. We have 6 million refugees living in our country without any proper documentation. And they are huge on our resources. They are involved in terrorism. They provide security to the Taliban who cross in Pakistan from Afghanistan to blow up mosques, to blow up offices, and all sorts of terrorist activities. So this is what I referred to the interview I gave yesterday or day before yesterday. And I've been saying this thing for a very long time, that we had no business to enter into Afghanistan when the Soviet Union invaded or intervened or went there on invitation of Kabul. Where factual position is that they went there on the invitation of Kabul. The intervention was not an invasion. But we became a party to the whole conflict, and there were consequences to bear for us for a very long time, and we're still paying the price for that. And same happened after 9/11. In both cases, we were left, to face the consequences of because we are in the neighborhood. We share border with Afghanistan. The two communities, the Pashtun communities, are both sides, living half of it or maybe 40% of it in Afghanistan, rest in Pakistan. So this is what we are facing. And nobody's there to take responsibility of what's happening to us. We the main target or main victim of terrorism in this region is Pakistan, and we are being blamed by India for something with which we have nothing to do.
Well, yeah, India also claimed it's a victim of terrorism, of course. Coming back to this so-called dirty work, why exactly did Islamabad agree to provide this for the West, in your view?
I think it was a mistake. If you remember, in both cases, we had military rulers in those days. General Ziya way back in the 80s and General Musharraf earlier in this century in 2011. So there was no, public support or public consent needed or sought by the rulers then. It was decided by one or two or three persons on the top, and the Pakistan joined the effort. I actually, why I criticize that effort is because of the consequence we are facing today, because of the effort we joined way back twice in the past.
Wow.
So that is the main grounds of have. I think it was a huge mistake. Pakistan was a very peaceful country with absolutely no religious problems, no religious extremism. We had no extremism at all. We were a very tolerant society. It was made to, the society was then, the whole ethos of the society was changed to support the jihad. And this was jihad which was invented by the West. It was not a jihad. It was a power struggle between two superpowers. So this is a long story. We have a separate program on this, But this is what happened, and nobody can deny that. This is how things did happen. And way back in 1889, when America went away from this area, we were slapped with Pressler amendments. There were embargoes against Pakistan. Pakistan was isolated, despite the fact that we were the springboard for whatever was happening in Afghanistan.
That's fascinating, and it goes on for another bit. We could certainly listen to that, but we are kind of running short on time here. What he's saying there, he's describing Operation Cyclone. He's describing in the late 70s when National Security Advisor Zbigniew Brzezinski, the father to Mika Brzezinski from Morning Joe, went to Afghanistan and brought a Saudi national named Osama bin Laden and said, "Hey, I'm going to arm you with weapons. We're going to round up mujahideen, people who want to fight to defend the Muslim homeland. We're going to bring you to Afghanistan, and we're going to fight the Soviets, because if you don't fight the Soviets, the communists are going to come in here and take away your religion," right? Because the communists don't believe in religion. So, and of course, they offered training, they offered schooling, they offered education to the children of these mujahideen fighters. And that education came in the form of schools that taught Salafi Islam, radicalism, that turned them all into jihadis. And so what he's saying is, 10, 15 years later, when the United States left in 1989, they were left with the consequences of that, which was a bunch of radicalized young people who had been to these schools, who had been taught that, they needed to go fight and die in a jihad in order to give their life meaning. And we, the United States, funded and created that on behalf of whatever it was Henry Kissinger and Zbigniew Brzezinski were putting together at the Trilateral Commission in 1973.
Yeah, that was so courageous what that guy did. I've never heard an active defense minister of Pakistan speaking the way he just did. What an admission. And it's so important that this type of language be used at this point, because it really is looking quite serious. And a trap has been laid using these foreign instigated terrorist cells that have taken on. They're so out of the control of the government of Pakistan at this point. Like he said, it's a monster that's been groomed and organized by forces that don't care about that region at all and are willing to blow it all up for geopolitical endeavors. And you had a few people who tried to push back against it. You had Benazir Bhutto, her father Zulfikar Bhutto, who was also killed under the orders of Henry Kissinger back in '79 when General Zia took over. And again, as soon as Zia came in, like that defense minister said, Zia and then Musharraf later on encouraged on orders from the Americans the growth of this whole mujahideen. Not even mujahideen. It's like this hardcore terrorist movement that has been just used. And now you have like India talking about they've just canceled as soon as this terrorist action happened in Kashmir on the I guess the Indian side. You had like 26 Hindus killed, mostly Hindus, some Christians, by these terrorists from the I guess the Kashmiri Resistance Front. And it's weird because Kashmir is all. I was just reading how it's a strange territory. You've got there certain princes were promised independence by the British in 1946-47, and they were promised their own Kashmiri state. They didn't get it. Ultimately, it turned out to be a Muslim Pakistan and a mostly Hindu, India that shared this territory in Kashmir in the north. That also has a certain border with China. China's very fragile there and on many levels. And it's one of the most militarized places in the world. There's like 700,000, I was just reading this, Indian troops stationed there. So the fact that you could have such a terrorist action happen in such a militarized, like a zone of high security is a huge oversight. And now the pushback without any serious investigation from Delhi, they haven't seriously investigated it too deeply, but they immediately just canceled all visas of visiting Pakistanis. They closed down the border. Oh yeah, there you go. That's actually a useful map, I guess, for people to sort of see this area of Kashmir.
Yeah. So the map I'm showing to give context is this area where you have Afghanistan, Pakistan, and China and India all converging. And this region right here is called Jammu and Kashmir, and it's been fought over for a very, very long time. And you can see it's along a very, very important trade route because there's a river valley right here. And going back to the days of the East India Company, which we've covered plenty on this show, in the 1840s, and wars that were fought with the Sikh over control of this river valley, because if you wanted to move the luxury goods and the highly sought after spices from India and China into the West, you had to move through this river valley on land. So, so that's the context. Let me go back to this map. Finish your thought. I'm sorry, Matt. Didn't mean to interrupt.
No, that's super important. The visual that map also super good because you see their Kashmir had Kashmir on the upper left in a darker green, and then you have a little bit on the upper right next to China as well in darker yellow. You got separatists there. You got all sorts of. It's very messy. And then beyond that, you've had several military conflicts, little wars over the years since the 40s, over what would be the destiny or the future of this zone. Even on the India side, there's still more Muslims living there, which also is a bit of a messy thing. And yeah, India has just like shut down the line of control. They've expelled Pakistani diplomats, making it more difficult to have communications. There is the cancellation of the suspension of the Indus Waters Treaty, which was set up in 1960 to provide water from the Indus Valley to Pakistan. The Pakistanis are now saying that that's an act of war to shut them off of vital water. And maybe, I get where they're coming from, but that's not the right language to use, especially when you have nuclear powers at each other's throats. And then certain other officials within Pakistan have said, and again, keep in mind, there's been no proof that Pakistan had any hand in that terrorist action whatsoever. But now you have officials on both sides saying that nuclear weapons should be considered to be used if either side considers its security interest to be threatened. It's so counterproductive. It's dizzying how counterproductive this is. And yet it seems like it's just spiraling. So I get why this defense minister is speaking so candidly right now, because it's like he's at the end of his rope. He could just see things are just falling out of control in this area so fast.
Yeah, and what you're describing, this water treaty that went into effect in 1960, a bunch of dams that are along, I believe it's the Indus River, but there are other rivers in this area. Obviously, the Indus River is one of the most important rivers in the world. The Indus River Valley is the one I was just describing, which is this area. And it's the first time since the treaty was signed in 1960 that they closed every single, like dam door. So they're basically just cutting off all the water that would be flowing from the India side into Pakistan. And that's obviously going to impact a lot of people, farmland, etc. And yeah, to say it's an act of war, I don't think is an overstatement. It's obviously very provocative language, but I'm not sure that, I mean, considering that we've made similar comparisons in places like Gaza and Crimea, where they also cut off the water, it's not totally like a overstatement. It's also worth noting that I believe it was Abbottabad, isn't that where Osama bin Laden was purportedly caught in his top secret bunker, right? Which
right
next. Yeah.
Go on. No, finish your thought. I'm sorry.
Well, yeah, which ended up just being a house, right? He was just living in a house, like just walking around casually. Obviously, the CIA knew he was there the whole time. I don't even believe that story, like the Zero Dark 30 story. I don't even think that story was real.
No, I don't think so either. But
yeah,
even in that story, the location of that house where he was supposedly killed was right next to. It was like within short walking distance of a major Pakistan military base.
Yeah.
Again, like it smells like propaganda, and the fact that they got rid of the body so that they're like, oh yeah, we just threw his body over the ship into the water. En route back home to the United States.
Didn't even take a picture of him. Didn't even take a picture of his face to prove that they actually killed him.
No, yeah, it smells like fakery completely. He probably died in the first weeks after 9/11, it seems.
Yeah. When he was getting those dialysis treatments, right?
Right.
And dialysis treatment, it means your liver, doesn't that mean your kidneys are failing?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So just to give everyone a little bit of context here, this dashed line right here where it says Azad Kashmir, where it's dark green and orange, that's the border between Jammu Kashmir and Azad Kashmir. Jammu and Kashmir on the India side, Azad Kashmir on the Pakistan side. The distance between that border and Islamabad, which is the capital of Pakistan, is less than 60 miles. The distance between that border, like that same border I just described, and the Afghanistan border over here near Jalalabad, is 150 miles, less than 150 miles. So you're talking about a relatively very small area. And remember, Kabul, which is all the way over here on the left, that was the site of the Bagram Air Base. Remember when there was the disastrous withdrawal of the U.S. military from there, the attack at the Abbey Gate, the 13 U.S. military servicemen killed, that was conducted by ISIS-K. ISIS-K is a Pakistan-based affiliate of ISIS. ISIS, of course, is a CIA cutout, a CIA front group. It's a coalition of individual terror cells that have been created over the years, all thrown together under one banner. And so ISIS-K is the Pakistan version of ISIS. They're the ones who did that attack. The media at the time presented it as like Taliban potentially. But then months later, we get that, that was August. I think it was January the following year, 5-6 months later, we get the report that the Taliban hunted down the ISIS-K guys involved and killed all of them on behalf of Donald Trump, even though Joe Biden was president, because they signed an agreement with Donald Trump in Doha called the Doha Agreement. And in the Doha Agreement, it said, Donald Trump said, I'm going to give you, the Taliban, control of Afghanistan. We're going to leave Afghanistan. It's your country now. In exchange, you're going to hunt down and destroy any terrorist group that operates on your soil or like in your area. And so they went and killed those guys on behalf of Donald Trump, keeping their word to Donald Trump that they signed in that agreement, even though he wasn't even president at the time. So all of that matters. The ISIS-K, in my opinion, is obviously the U.S. State Department. I wonder if ISIS-K was behind this one in Jammu Kashmir. It seems way too convenient for it not to be. And of course, now the blame is being pinned on the Pakistani government when it could have just as easily been a proxy group operating on behalf of the city of London, Belgium, DC. I mean, name your Western power, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And then I actually have a little image here too, because there's so many. Sorry, I just pulled this up. There are so many different terrorist cells in this region active, and I was noticing that India cut off the border to Punjab and Amritsar. So Amritsar is the headquarters of the center of the aspiring Khalistani separatists just to the south of this area in Kashmir. So right below Kashmir is the supposed Khalistani nation that doesn't exist. But again, it was a Sikh. The British had promised a bunch of Sikhs back in 1947 that they would give them their own country too. And that's sort of the region that overlaps a bit of Pakistan, a bit of India, right below Kashmir.
What a familiar story that is, right? They promised people their sovereignty and then they rug pulled them and didn't give it to them. Imagine that.
Well, yeah, so out of character. And so you got these terrorists that were behind the murder of Indira Gandhi. It seems her son as well, Rajiv, who was also prime minister after Indira was killed. He died in a plane crash. She was murdered by her Khalistani bodyguards. Why she would have allowed her bodyguards to become her bodyguards. But Amritsar, which is sort of this palatial headquarters, the spiritual center, was also proven to be at the heart of narcotics, drug running, terrorist financing on behalf of factions within Israel, Britain, and the USA in the 1960s, 70s, 80s, consistently. And I've not seen any evidence that it fully got rid of its, ancient mandate. And in Canada, the head of the Khalistani sort of freedom movement is based in Canada. And they recently that's actually their map of what they believe this Khalistani kingdom should be again. And they did this weird referendum inviting Sikhs in Canada, of which I think there was something like 40,000 or something who participated in this vote to separate from India. And you could see it's so big. Like they want Delhi, the capital of India, according to them, to be carved out and made part of this Khalistani kingdom that the British promised them. And they've been given sanctuary and safe haven in Canada now for many, many years because they are registered as a terrorist organization. The what are they called? The Sikhs for Justice, right? That's their technical name. But and they're the ones who had a representative who was killed in British Columbia last year, and it's been blamed on Modi. And the reality is that Modi doesn't seem to have anything to do with this at all, but the Canadian government under Trudeau and then Carney is saying, yeah, we have to expel our Indian diplomats. They're giving full support to these groups. Again, just demonstrating that there's another agency which is not even Canadian at play, utilizing these groups to divide and conquer and break up India into chaos at a time when it's so important that you have some coherence among the Eurasian powers of the BRICS nations, the Shanghai Cooperation Organization. India and Pakistan are both members of the Shanghai Cooperation Organization. Very important alliances there. India is a big part of the BRICS. Russia, China, Iran is a part of that. India, vital player. Brazil, again, as we saw from Brookfield's influences over Brazil's infrastructure. Brazil is a major weak link to destabilize it there on that front. Brookfield, BlackRock, that whole thing is very active there. But they're looking for every little weak crack in the multipolar alliance to just hit on.
Yep.
And so, yeah, very.
Worth noting, Saudi Arabia too in the past 3 years has invested tens of billions of dollars in constructing hydroelectric dams in Pakistan in the Indus River Valley on the Pakistan side.
Wow.
I think they've built at least 3, but and each one's $5 billion at least. So yeah, I mean they're there. They have money invested there. They have interest there. So like you said, the multipolar alliance is being hit. Like all the fissures are being found, and they're just trying to squeeze the fissures and break them wide open. And because again, when you're talking about a coalition of sovereign nations, the best way to subvert and stop the coalition is to remind those sovereign nations why they hated each other in the first place before they formed the coalition.
Yeah.
So you stick the knife in those fissures, and you remind them, remember this territory that you've been fighting over for centuries. Like, let's not forget that. Like, let's do a terrorist event there. Boom. Now you're looking at like international war between those two member states. So yeah, this is very much to be expected. I expect more of this kind of stuff to happen. It's going to require cooler heads to prevail. It's going to require strong leaders to not pick up the sword and seek retribution. And I expect key members of what we would call the Sovereign Alliance to play a big role in that. Putin, Xi, MBS, Modi. I mean, Modi's been somebody who I think has been promoting those values. His rhetoric right now, hopefully, is more of just posturing to address the sentiment that's probably being felt based on the immediate aftermath of this. That's not totally unsurprising, but yeah, I mean, we want to make sure that the response to this is precise, right, and surgical, and not just like overblown and let's just go to war with the country. It's like, let's go after the people behind this. Okay, who was behind it? Show us who was behind it, because something tells me you run that down to its endpoint and you're going to find some Western interest, the same people who are causing problems in the Middle East, the same people who are causing problems in Ukraine are going to be behind that one too.
Yep. Amen, man. Absolutely. Any do we want to go to any questions or thoughts? Or
let's see. I don't think we have any rants. I don't think we have any boosts either. So we'll just kind of if you're listening to this, I know a lot of people tell me they listen to this on replay because of just the time of day, and I totally get that. You can go to badlandsmedia.tv. You can click on boost over here and leave what is effectively a Rumble rant. We actually get to keep 100% of the boosts. The Rumble takes, I think, 20 or 30% of the Rumble rants. So this is like a Rumble rant anytime, and we will read it on screen. Oh, it looks like we had a few that just came in. So Jay, $20. Troy McLaughlin, author of Saturn Death Cults, points out 322 refers to Genesis 3:22. It was never about humans not knowing the difference between good and evil. It was about those who want to be as gods, and as a god, I decide what is good and evil. I'm not familiar with Troy McLaughlin, but that is, I would agree with that. That I do think this is not necessarily about the difference between good and evil, although it is, but it's also about people trying to establish a material kingdom on earth and anoint themselves as the gods of humanity, so to speak. And you look at the oligarchs, and that's basically what they are and how they see themselves.
Yep.
The second one, this is also from Jay, $10. Matt, you know the electric universe. Have you ever delved into Saturn theory? If not, could email a condensed breakdown. Saturn was our original sun, along with Venus and Mars as the goal. I think he means gods atop Mount Olympus, reigning over the Golden Age Garden of Eden.
I know the electric universe. I'm a fan. I ascribe to that, the thesis that we live in a plasma universe, and that there are no 4 fundamental forces of the standard model, that there's just one force, electromagnetism and harmonics, and everything else it can be understood as a sub branch of electromagnetic properties, and plasma. So definitely I'm on board with that. There isn't the particular Saturn model that I think Velikovsky originated. I don't know if it came before Velikovsky. Definitely he and his network promoted it. I've seen the model. I don't believe it, but I appreciate the internally consistent logic of it. But yeah, I don't subscribe to that particular one. But again, the best ideas out there for better theories of science are located within the electric universe movement, for sure. Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah. Well, thank you, Jay, for the rants, and we appreciate that. Everyone, if you would please hit the thumbs up on your way out of here. And Matt, I'll see you tomorrow. And
I guess, yeah.
Look forward to seeing you there, guys. Again, badlandsmedia.tv/events. Get your virtual ticket, and we're going to be having a great time and producing some content outside of just the planned panels. So, Matt, I will see you tomorrow. Everyone else, I will see you next week.
Looking forward to it. Bye, everybody.